February 1959. Deep within the frozen wilderness of the northern Ural Mountains, a group of 9 experienced hikers embarked on a journey that would become one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. They were students, athletes, and skilled adventurers. Each member of the expedition had extensive experience surviving in harsh winter conditions. Their mission was simple: complete a challenging trek across the icy peaks of the Ural Range, an accomplishment that would earn them advanced sports qualifications and bring them immense personal pride. They were well prepared for the brutal Russian winter, equipped with the best gear available. Led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, the group consisted of 8 men and 2 women. One member, Yuri, fell ill early in the expedition and was forced to turn back, unknowingly saving his own life. The remaining 9 continued, their spirits high, pushing deeper into the formidable terrain. Their route took them through some of the most remote and unforgiving landscapes in the Soviet Union. They were charting their progress, taking photographs, and keeping detailed journals, all of which would later become crucial pieces of an incomplete puzzle. On February 1st, after days of challenging ascent, the group established a camp on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl. In the local Monsa language, Kholat Syakhl translates to Dead Mountain, a name that would take on a chilling prescience. The location was exposed, high on the mountain, and subject to extreme weather. Despite the harsh conditions, this was a routine part of such an expedition. They meticulously set up their large tent, designed to withstand the brutal winds and freezing temperatures. All seemed to be proceeding as planned, a typical evening in the vast, silent wilderness. The Dyatlov group was expected to return to the village of Vizhay by February 12th, where they would send a telegram to their sports club. When the deadline passed with no word, initial concern was muted. Delays were common in such expeditions. However, as more days slipped by, anxiety grew. Family members and friends began to press for action. By February 20th, with no contact, a full-scale search and rescue operation was launched, mobilizing volunteers, military personnel, and aircraft. The vastness of the Urals made the task incredibly difficult, each passing day diminishing hope. On February 26th, searchers finally located the group's tent on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. What they found immediately raised alarm. The tent was partially collapsed and covered in snow, but critically, it had been violently cut open from the inside. This was not the work of an animal, nor the result of a storm. It suggested an urgent, desperate escape. A scene of utter chaos lay within and around the structure, the belongings of 9 people scattered, indicating a rapid, unplanned evacuation. This discovery only deepened the unsettling silence of the mountain. Inside the ruined tent, a chilling tableau unfolded. All of the hikers' personal belongings, including their warm clothes, boots, and essential survival gear, had been left behind. In sub-zero temperatures, abandoning such vital equipment was unthinkable for experienced mountaineers. It suggested that whatever prompted their desperate flight offered no time for preparation, no opportunity to gather even the most basic protection against the elements. The scene begged the fundamental question: why did 9 experienced hikers flee their tent so suddenly, leaving behind everything necessary for survival? Leading away from the tent, a trail of footprints was discovered, clearly indicating that the hikers had descended the slope towards a nearby forest. The tracks showed that some were barefoot, others wearing only socks, and a few in single boots or felt boots. This detail further underscored the urgency of their departure. They had not even taken time to properly dress for the extreme cold. The footprints, gradually disappearing under fresh snowfall, painted a harrowing picture of a disorganized, panicked retreat, not an orderly evacuation. It suggested a sudden, overwhelming threat. Approximately 500 meters from the tent, near the edge of a small forest, the first 2 bodies were found. Georgy Krivonashenko and Yuri Doroshenko were discovered dressed only in their underwear, near the remains of a small campfire under a large cedar tree. Their hands were burned, suggesting a desperate attempt to build a fire for warmth, but the effort had been futile in the brutal cold. The scene indicated severe hypothermia, but the minimal clothing in such extreme conditions raised the question of why they were so inadequately dressed, far from the warmth of their abandoned tent. Further up the slope, between the cedar tree and the tent, the bodies of Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin were discovered. They appeared to have been attempting to return to the tent, possibly to retrieve the life-saving warm clothing left inside. Dyatlov was found clutching a small branch, while Kolmogorova had signs of a struggle. Slobodin had a fractured skull. These three were better clothed than the first two, but still inadequately for the conditions, suggesting a desperate race against the clock and the elements. Their determined attempt to return to the tent reinforces the idea that something drove them out. The initial medical examination of these first 5 bodies concluded that hypothermia was the primary cause of death. This was a grim but seemingly logical outcome given the minimal clothing, extreme temperatures, and lack of shelter. However, it failed to address the central enigma. What force compelled these experienced hikers to abandon their tent, their warm clothes, and their safety? While the ultimate cause of death was clear for these individuals, the preceding events remained shrouded in mystery. The question was not how they died, but why they had been put in such a perilous situation. It would be another 2 months, well into May, before the remaining 4 bodies were found. Buried deep under more than 4 meters of snow in a ravine, the discovery was made only when the spring thaw began. The bodies of Nikolai Thibeaux-Brignoles, Semyon Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolveda, and Ludmila Dubinina were uncovered, revealing a far more disturbing truth than initially suspected. The location itself, a deep natural trench, suggested they had sought greater shelter or concealment, perhaps trying to escape whatever force had driven them from the tent. This discovery changed everything. These 4 victims bore injuries that defied explanation. Nikolai Thibeaux-Brignoles had a fractured skull. Ludmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov suffered from massive chest trauma, described as crushed ribs, akin to being hit by a car. Alexander Kolveda also had severe injuries. Crucially, there were no external wounds or signs of a struggle corresponding to these internal devastations. It was as if an immense, invisible force had struck them. This perplexing detail immediately ruled out any conventional attack by humans or animals. What kind of pressure could cause such catastrophic damage without leaving a mark? Adding to the horror, some of these later found victims presented even more gruesome anomalies. Ludmila Dubinina was found with her eyes missing and her tongue completely absent. Semyon Zolotaryov also had missing eyes. These were not injuries consistent with animal scavenging or the natural decomposition expected in a frozen environment. The precision and severity of these missing parts only intensified the feeling of an unnatural, inexplicable event. What could cause such specific, horrific mutilations to occur, particularly without any other external signs of violence? Another bizarre detail emerged during the investigation. Radiation was detected on some of the victims' clothing. Specifically, samples from Ludmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov's garments showed traces of alpha radiation. While the levels were not immediately lethal, their presence was highly unusual and completely unexpected for a civilian hiking expedition in such a remote area. This finding sparked theories of secret military tests or some unknown, radioactive substance. It introduced another layer of perplexing complexity, further divorcing the incident from a simple hypothermia case. Faced with conflicting evidence, hypothermia, severe internal trauma, missing body parts, and radiation, investigators were left without a coherent explanation. The area was temporarily closed to the public for years, fueling speculation and conspiracy theories. The official conclusion of the Soviet inquiry was astonishing. The hikers had died due to an unknown compelling force. This vague and unprecedented ruling only solidified the mystery, leaving the core question unanswered. What force could be so powerful, so sudden, and so terrifying as to cause 9 experienced hikers to flee their tent to their deaths? One of the most confounding aspects of the Dyatlov Pass incident is the absence of any signs of external struggle or other individuals. There were no tracks indicating anyone else had been near the tent or the bodies. No evidence of a fight, no defensive wounds, and no weapons. The injuries, while severe, did not appear to be inflicted by human hands in a struggle. This absence of a clear assailant or a visible threat is central to the mystery. The hikers seem to be fleeing from an invisible or unseen danger, acting in a desperate, unified panic. Over the decades, numerous theories have been proposed to explain the Dyatlov Pass incident. Some suggest an avalanche, although the slope angle and the nature of the injuries make this unlikely. Others point to an infrasound phenomenon, generating panic and disorientation. Secret military tests involving strange weapons have also been hypothesized, attempting to explain the radiation and the compelling force. Even a rare, localized wind slab avalanche has been considered, capable of creating a sudden, violent impact on the tent without leaving typical avalanche debris. Each theory attempts to answer the fundamental question: what caused them to flee? What remains consistent across almost all analyses is the suddenness of the event. The state of the tent, cut from the inside, the abandoned belongings, and the minimal clothing of the initial victims all point to an immediate, overwhelming impetus to escape. There was no time to prepare, no opportunity to gather essential survival gear. The hikers were either startled awake or perceived an imminent threat so profound that staying inside the relative safety of their tent, even for a moment, was not an option. This suddenness is the crucial element that drives the enduring mystery. The hikers' movements also suggest a desperate, perhaps confused, reaction. Some attempted to build a fire, others tried to return to the tent, while the last four sought refuge in a deep ravine. Was it a coordinated escape from a perceived threat, or a disoriented scattering driven by panic and hypothermia? The varying degrees of clothing and injury among the group add to the complexity. The act of fleeing from the tent was universal, but their subsequent actions reveal a group struggling against an unknown adversary, desperately trying to find safety in an unforgiving landscape. Over 6 decades later, the Dyatlov Pass Incident remains one of the most chilling and inexplicable cold cases in history. The central question endures: why did 9 experienced hikers flee their tent, leaving behind their only hope of survival in the brutal cold? The official unknown compelling force offers no closure. The evidence, a violently cut tent, barefoot footprints, severe internal trauma with no external marks, missing body parts, and radiation, paints a picture of horror beyond comprehension. Until definitive answers emerge, the dead mountain will forever guard the secrets of the Dyatlov group's final, terrifying moments.